日本のカルチャーよりかは違う国のカルチャーとかのが興味があるから別にプラウドではないかな。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Miami.
And the topic of the day is nationalism. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review on whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, nationalism. Nationalism is bad, right? But I don't think I've met a single person who doesn't have any nationalistic tendencies. Is it okay to disparage the teams of other countries in sporting events? Is it okay to have pride in the language that you speak? Today we're talking about nationalism, and one of the reasons why is I'm in Panama, and not saying Panama super nationalistic. This is just more of a personal story I had, which goes like this. I'm playing tennis, as I do with my brother, and then this one Panamanian dude walks up to us, and we end up having a conversation in which this person scouts out basically on the way that we're dressed primarily, or the fact my brother has lighter skin than I am, and he asks a question, "Are you guys Panamanian?" To which my brother says, "Oh yes, I'm born in Panama. I'm Panamanian," and we start speaking. We're speaking in Spanish, and I have a stronger accent than my brother does, and then he says, "Oh, looks like you're Panamanian."
アクセントはスパニッシュでのアクセントってことだよね。
No, when I'm speaking Spanish, yeah, I've stronger. My brother lived in Panama until he was older age before we moved, and so it's a whole thing. But anyways, and then he goes, "Okay, yeah, you're Panamanian American," and then my brother says, "Oh, my brother is as well," and then he goes, "No, he's American Panamanian," and then this got me thinking about how the distinguishing factor with going on here. So my brother looks less Panamanian than I do, significantly. And there have been many stories where I've been the one that people tend to approach because I look more Panamanian. But language as well is a factor in the cultural identity. But I thought that Spanish isn't unique to Panama, not even close to that. And so, yeah, I was having thoughts about where the line is drawn between, and also Spanish is spoken in the United States, right? There's a huge Mexican population as well. Have you ever thought about, like, we've talked about like the role that Japanese plays a little bit into like the cultural identity of Japan, but I guess my first question to you would be, how intrinsic do you think the Japanese language is to being Japanese? And do you believe that like somebody who can't speak Japanese could ever be like self-identify as Japanese?
まあそもそもそうだね。なんか結構メイドインジャパンとか日本人好きだし、日本に誇りを持ってる人結構いるね。なんか日本って多分なんだろう、あんまり悪いイメージが多分ないじゃん。他の国の人からしてもさ、日本ってアジアの
I can think of two countries that have a bad view of
まあ置いといて一般的に言うとさ、なんて言うんだろう。まあ綺麗な国、和風のね、和のものがあったり、その神社とかお寺とかあったり、人は親切とか、ものがなんで細かくて綺麗とか、あとそうね、日本語自体が綺麗とかね、言う人もいるしね。なんかあと礼儀正しいとかね、polite、もう Japanese people are polite ってみんな言うじゃん。結構
言われる。
そう。結構そうみんなに言われるから日本人でいることの誇りを持ってて、まあそれがなんか裏目に悪い方に出ちゃって、そのなんて言うんだろうね、まあ差別っていうのもあるよね。そのまあ私はなんだろう、私の家系っていうのかな、まあ血筋的には台湾だからさ。まあ、名字もちょっと台湾っぽいんだけど、それが理由でなんか結構小学校とかでもいじめられたっていう、まあさ、ちっちゃい子ってさ、何かしらいじめるものを見つけようとするからさ、多分それでいじめられたのか分かんないんだけど、あとまあね、まあそれも多分ワンエッセンスとしてまあ日本人っぽくないとかねのが入ってんのかなっていう。
So would you say, I guess let me rephrase the question then. But which one would you consider more important if you were to choose one between being able to speak Japanese or like the ethnic background and appearance of Japanese or the cultural aspects of it
なんか
together versus like the language itself?
なんかね、どっちか選べって言われたら、なんかね、見た目な気がする。なんかどんなに日本語がも
What do you
う
mean by 見た目?
見た目が日
As
本
in like
人じ
how
ゃ
you
ないと、
literally how you look
そう
or
日
like
本
how you act?
見た目、how you look。見た目が日本人じゃないと、なんだろうね。日本人って認めない人は多いと思う。なんでかっていうとさ、これもなんか多分 YouTube でこういうコンテンツの人多いじゃん。なんだけど、例えば、全く日本人に見えない、アジア人じゃないね。もう黒人とか白人とか、まあ、ヒスパニック系の人とかね。で、生まれも育ちも日本ですごいペラペラだけど、みんな日本人からみんなに日本人って認められないとか、まず英語で喋られるとかさ、結構言うじゃん。そういうインタビュー
What,
の。
I mean, something I found. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I find something interesting though. I told in my example that was one of the inspirations for this episode. I mentioned how that was the exact opposite in my encounter, and I noticed that there is a shift as I've been like speaking to more and more people, where like I said, I'd say my brother just he doesn't look very Panamanian at all. Genetics are weird. We don't look very related to each other. But I look like significantly way more Panamanian than my brother does.
多分肌の色
the
じゃない
Spanish. No, it's not. It's not just that. Like the dark, like my hair, his hair is much lighter than mine. Panamanians all have like very black hair, primarily speaking. But yeah, and like there's a whole bunch of stuff. But anyways, the ability, like the Spanish ability, and specifically, like I realized, like specific slang, I think a lot of people were catching onto as well, was what I've noticed with how people were talking around what seemed to be like what made somebody very more or less Panamanian. And that also might be because in Panama specifically, there's lighter skinned Panamanians as well as darker skinned Panamanians, and Panama, just its history in general, has a lot of different ethnicities in it for many different reasons. Whereas I feel like for Japan, I mean, I think it's referred to, I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to call it an ethno-state, but it's for the longest time only really been one ethnicity. And I feel like that might be one of the reasons that I've been aware of, but now it's coming off more like apparent to me when I'm thinking about why the visual aspect of it is valued so heavily. Right? Does it make sense? Like and I feel like, for example, if we went to, if Japan had a high immigration, like now going forward to offset their aging problems, then you'd probably see Japan where the cultural and language might become the signifying, like the identifier, as opposed to just how the person looks. Does that make sense?
まあちょっとは変わっていくとは思うけど、今のところそうね、わかんない。個人的な意見からするとみんなが見た目で判断してるとは思うね。それこそさ、
I mean, what 判断 in this case?
なんていうの、その見た目で日本人っぽくなかったら外国人だとみなすみたいな。
So do you think that you look 日本人っぽい?
I don't look 日本人っぽい。
Okay, so but do you think people around you don't think you're Japanese then?
なんかね、ハーフかな。なんか私が例えば外国人と一緒にいると、その店員さんとかねは英語で話してくるの、私にね。
Yeah.
でも例えば私が、まあ、普通の日本人と一緒にいると日本語で話しかけられる。まあでも一回これ面白いのがさ、高校生の時になんかそのディズニーランド行ったのね、4人でね。で前2人後ろ2人って並んでて、前2人が私ともう1人テニス部の男の子で、めちゃめちゃ肌が黒いのよ。でさ、焼けてね。で、その男の子がさ、多分わかんないけどちょっとあだ名がカンボジアみたいな感じで、なんか別に差別とかじゃないよ。すごい肌が黒いからなんか東南アジアかなみたいな、そういうあだ名がついてる子なんだけど、その前の2人が外国人っぽすぎて、 英語で話しかけられたっていうのがもう面白すぎてみんなで笑ってたっていう話があるんだけど、まあ、要するにあれ周りと一緒にいる人によって日本人か外国人かじゃあ日本語か英語で話しかけられるなんていうの場合がある。私の場合は。あと、
okay.
よくね日本人っぽくない顔がねちょっと違うって言われるんだよね。
Well, yeah, no, I was more talking about how you are, you're treated. I feel like if you're of a certain degree of Asianness looking, you will
エイ
get
ジ
a
アンだ
pass,
け
even
ど
if
違
you're not
うエイジアンじゃないっ
East
てい
Asian
うのは。
specifically.
うん。
Yeah. Oh, so that's actually something I want to talk about. Well, first, before that, would you say that you're proud to be Japanese? I'm curious.
いや別にどちらかっていうと自分は日本のカルチャーよりかは違う国のカルチャーとかのが興味があるから別にプラウドではないかな。
Would you say that the average Japanese person is prideful to be Japanese from what you've met? Like they would if you asked them that question?
プラウドまあ、
Like,
言うんじゃない、なんか日本人でよかった。
I feel like that's pretty common, especially Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you phrase it that way. I guess the hokori omou versus なんか生まれてよかった are two different feelings, I feel like.
ね、多分予想からすると日本人でよかったじゃなくて日本に住んでてよかったとか、まあ日本でよかったとかは言うと思う。まあ私も日本でよかったとは思うよ。なんでかっていうと治安がいいし、なんか別にね、まあ先進国だしね。
I
日
feel
本
like
は。
a distinction between them comes from, like I said, I'm very interested about this line between like this notion of well, what pride means, and if it really can be meaningfully distinguished between nationalism. But I've noticed that what are you saying? I can't remember what you were saying a second ago, but something I noticed was like not only I mentioned like it was Spanish ability, but I was having a conversation with one of my brother's friends, which I guess I'm now friends with. When they were talking about, they were texting my brother, and he used a specific term that for some reason or another Panamanians don't use. And then the person was like, "Oh, it's such a shame," in Spanish, because you're like, "Oh, Panamanians don't use this term." And what I was thinking was, you always have a progressive level of like tests you need to pass to like get close to people, and there's always kind of almost an infinite amount of these, where first it's like if you have, I think we've talked about this before, where if I'm in America, then anybody who's brown, like we're on the same team by default basically.
Okay.
But go ahead. Yeah, but you bring it into Panama, everybody who's not Panamanian is, and Panamanians are, you know, they're pretty chill. But like there's some like beef between Venezuelans, so it's a whole thing. But then it's like then there's more of a separation between, okay, you're Panamanian or not Panamanian. Like you say Mexican in America when you're a Panamanian, you're like, you know, we're chill. But you say like there's somebody who's Mexican in Panama, there's a little more like distance between you and them. And then let's say you're in Panama, and then you go. Like then I've noticed that there, like I said, there's specific slang, and depending where the city you grew up, there are multiple locations in Panama, like more rural and urban, and the same thing is true in Japan as well. And then when you get even smaller than that, and you're in the same city or town, then it's like, well, what sport are you into? And then it's like, okay, well, what sport team are you into? And then it just goes closer and closer until it all the way goes back to your family unit, and then even within your family unit, you know what I'm saying, you have like preferences as well. And so I just find it very interesting how it's like help me reframe this idea of like this whole like what does it mean to be Japanese into just generally speaking, where does this come from, this like this grouping, or it's both almost like trying to find it's a two-step process of one part is trying to find people like you, but then it's by pushing people away from you, right? Like
なんだろう、そもそもさ人間ってさ自分と近い生物をまあなんて言うんだろう、好むとかね、親近感を持つとかもあるじゃん。でそれとともになんて言うんだろう、その人たちとグループになることで敵と 敵と敵対した時に、まあ、勝てるようにするみたいな、そういう性質は絶対あるじゃん。だからまずなんかその相手の人と喋ってて、この人と私はここが似てるなとか、そういう類似点をまず見つけたくなるし、なんて言うんだろう、類似点が多ければ多いほど、その人に親近感が湧くし、その人と仲良くなるチャンスは増える。
Yeah. Like, yeah, when you talk about on that level, like it makes sense. But it gets interesting when you extend it like up. Like how you can have these values assumed on the basis of your like how you look, what you're talking about earlier, which is I feel like a different step, right? Or like just because you like the same team as someone else, then that happens as well. I feel like a very good example of this, and I apologize to twins who are not like this. I do not want to make overgeneralizing stereotypes, but I will say that from my personal experience, all the identical looking twins I've known, and that's the interesting part. I've known many fraternal friends, so ones that don't look the same, but they're born at the same time, who this has not been the case for, and there might be a notion of confirmation bias. I mean, I'll answer that as well. But I've noticed with many identical twins, they are their best friends, always. I don't know if have you ever met any identical twins?
私、元マイエックスがトゥインでございまして、なんて言うんだろうね。まあ仲いいんだけど、なんだろう。なんて言うんだろうね。私は弟の方なのね。弟の方がマイエックスで、いつもなんか自分はそのお兄ちゃんと比べてここがダメとか、いつもお兄ちゃんはここが良くて僕はここがダメなんだみたいな、結構ね近いからこそ比べちゃう気がするんだよ。その兄弟なんていうの、年が離れた兄弟とかよりはその近すぎてさ、自分ともうほぼ一緒だから、ここがなんていうの差があるねって感じると、それがすごく大きいものに感じちゃうんだと思うし、もうずっとね、同じ生活、もうちっちゃい頃なんか親ってさ、同じ洋服とか着せるじゃん。そうするとさ、やっぱりなんて言うんだろうね、すごくなんて言うんだろう、自分なのに自分と離れていくっていう感覚が生まれるのかな。そう、結構。
I mean, obviously, people have different, like, I know that everybody doesn't have the same personality, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that you can have, like, you know what I'm saying, the very rival. It's like the thing, if you see somebody that looks exactly like you, I feel like, and they're succeeding and you're not, and other people, you know what I'm saying, mistake them for you, I'm very, like, it makes sense to me how you could also have the opposite reaction where you are extremely competitive with them. But either way, you're going to have a more than normal, like, closeness in some definition relationship. And like I said, personally for me, all the twins I've known have been each other's best friends. They always hang out with each other. And it kind of made me think what you were talking about with people wanting to be somebody that's similar to them. And it puts in a weird head in my space. Cause I'm not saying it's like this, but I can't, I'm just being honest in my head. I'm like, this is almost like, is this incest at some point? Where you're like, where you just are live with yourself, you know what I'm saying? An unhealthy degree of like, I love my personality. I'm so great. I look great. I want to be friends with myself. Like, you know what I'm saying? If there's somebody who looked exactly like me.
これがさ、その全部のトゥインズにアプライするかわからないんだけど、なんか、その高校もそのね、そのまあ X のとその X のお兄ちゃんの方ね、まあ2人とも同じ中学高校なのね。でさ、帰りもなんか、一緒なんだよ。その同じ電車に乗って一緒に歩いて帰ってる。まあそこにプラスでその他のフレンズとかもいるんだけどね。で、なんでいつも一緒に行動してんの、仲いいねっつったら、なんかそうするしかないんだよみたいな。たまたま一緒でたまたま一緒に帰るとか、今家が一緒だから絶対なんだよ。乗る方向も一緒だしみたいな。別に好きでやってるわけではないらしいよ。
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it depends on the person, obviously, and this is a little joking as well. But I do, with this whole idea of like wanting to be with people who are more and more similar to you, I can't help but want that example comes into my head, especially because my personal experience is I've noticed it at the very least so much. But I wanted to talk about like going back to like the national identity and in pride, because I always find there's something, and this is a little more like foreign relationship type thing, which is like you have this like I have multiple like I guess I'd be someone who doesn't really I have very very little pride in any location. It's probably because I've moved so many times. I don't when I like address myself to people, I'll say like depending on the situation, I'll say I'm Panamanian American, but I don't really resonate with America being my home or Panama being my home
あ、そうなの。
necessarily. I've been go ahead.
ジュイは、人生のどれぐらいのパーセンテージをパナマで過ごしたの？半分。
I'd have to do math. Maybe like I mean the older I get, the less it becomes when I'm not in Panama. But like I don't know, probably like 20%. I can't remember. Like an early,
アメリカの方が
early, or
larger
maybe no.
percentage.
Maybe my math is wrong now. I left when I was 8, but then there was also some more complicated history before that about moving or different locations. I don't even know if that math checks out. But what I would say is like even with America, what I've lived more so, I identify as American, but only because that's really the most accurate way I feel like to explain where I'm from. So, and when I think about being American, I think I'm grateful that I was born in America, not because I think America does a lot of things very great, but because it could have been much worse. That's basically how I frame it in my head. Whereas
That
why
could
I
have
think
been
Japanese
much
people
worse.
think,
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean, I could have been in a country or in a situation with much more poverty, uncertainty, like war-torn situation.
そうね。
There's so many words. I'm always, that's how I always reframe things in my head. And so in that sense, I'm glad I was American. But if I were to choose, I would have chosen almost any other, like, developed, I would have chosen Sweden, Norway, Amsterdam, Japan, Korea, maybe not. I don't know. That's a little too much paternal
私も
stress
ね、
for me.
日本なんかプラウドではないんだけど、日本に生まれては良かったなって思うよな。なんだかっていうとさ、他の国、アジアでさ、例えば中国、韓国とかだとするとさ、近いからね。あの国々はさ、もう受験戦争がすごいじゃん。もうね、受験、みんなわかると思うけど、受験に注ぐエネルギー、労力、お金がすんごいからさ、そこの時点でもう成功しないと、人生のなんて言うんだろう、ルーザーみたいな感じなんだよ。しかもその生まれた家系がお金持ちじゃないとあれ結構不利だよね。だって中国なんかさ、今はちょっと家庭教師がさ、バンされてるけど、前まではさ、家がお金持ちであればあるほどさ、そういうなんて言うんだろう、家庭教師だったり、バイオリン習わせたり、プライベートレッスンとかね。そういうのに、親がさ、お金をつぎ込むからさ、子供も自然とさ、英才教育で、優秀になってる。何でもできるようになってくるけどさ、もし自分が生まれた家系がさ、すんごく貧困な、家庭だったら、もうそういうチャンスがないわけじゃん、もう生まれた時点で。そうするともうそこで人生が決まっちゃってて、そういう受験の戦争には絶対勝てないから、いや、日本でよかったなっていうのはある。
I don't think like I mean, if you wanted to make that point, I think China. I mean, I think there are a lot of better examples, I guess, you could make, mainly because, like, historically speaking, it's a whole thing. But I'm just saying, China, as a percentage of its population that was lifted from poverty, has had like it's in a very different. You know what I'm saying? It's like comparing Japan to China, although they're close to each other, are they have. But you know what I'm saying? It's like a whole. It's a more complicated thing than that. Where I mean, even Japan, right? I'll just say that I know most of the doctors around you. You could even include yourself in this category. Are wealthier on average than the average Japanese person I've met, and that's just true. And so, one of the reasons for that is because you have connections, you have money, you have better schooling, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that applies everywhere in the world as well. But I guess when you're talking about it, you're saying like the chances would have been like higher. You know what I'm saying? If you're born in Japan, because at least there's like, I mean, right now it looks like.
So ne.
In the past, I'll say there was more of a like middle, like just everybody's middle class kind of going on here. But let me see. There was something. This idea that like, and I know this is a thing with I don't, because I don't always go into capitalism thing as well. But here's kind of how I think about it, which is like nationalism seems to me like something that is almost, especially there's a beef going on between India and China right now, which I was thinking about this as well, where it seems like it'll be it's very difficult to have a situation where we're able to overcome a lot of this like war and conflict that seems intrinsic to the world, where people have this strong sense of nationalism to the place that they were born, because like all of our systems, like economic systems, are highly dependent on trade. Yet at the same time, the more like I go to different places, it seems like all the countries, like at best they tolerate each other. But like I said, but even when you're within a country, it seems like there's a very natural tendency to want to not only just find a difference, but then make it clear that you're not part of the in-group. Japan even has the whole concept, right? The uchi and soto, like varying degrees of the uchi and soto. Yeah, and so like for you, you're not into sports or anything, right? I don't think so.
いや、なんかお父さんが、わしのパパがね、結構、なんて言うんだろう。テレビの野球とかサッカーとか見るのは好きで、それで見てるのを通りすがったらチラッと見る感じぐらい。とかでもちっちゃい頃は結構一緒に見てたかもしれない。
Okay, let me rephrase it. If Japan was in like the World Cup and you're like, are you cheering for Japan?
まあ、それは。
Like, soccer?
だってさ、例えばさ、まあ日本と
Well, it seems obvious. Hold up, that seems obvious, but that's not always the case. And they're like, you're right. Let me phrase it this: if I'm like watching an anime and like they show a bunch of different teams, and obviously they're never showing Panama, but kind of what ends up happening is you get a perspective, you get like a, you the way that I determine who I like isn't. There's a sense of dissociation. So it's like whoever I think is the coolest or whatever is the one I end up liking.
いや、私もそうだよ。だからもし私が、まあ、じゃあサッカーでいいよ。サッカーで、メッシが大好き。で、メッシも大ファンってだったら、メッシってアルゼンチンだっけ
I don't even want. This is my Hispanic.
まあじゃあメッシをアルゼンチンとして。
I've played a bunch of sports. I just don't watch any of them.
で、だからそしたらメッシが、これアルゼンチンじゃなかったらちょっと恥ずかしいな。じゃあメッシの国を応援するよ。メッシが大好きだったらね。日本を置いて。とか、あと、例えばさ、
Wait, hold up. You're telling me if the two teams are facing off, it's Japan versus,
そうだよ。
let's say Argentina. Then you're gonna be rooting for Argentina?
もし好きだったらね。
To beat Japan?
あと、それか、
What if hold up. It's the World Cup Finals. World Cup Finals.
ね、なんでそうやってスペシフィックにしていくの？
It's Japan versus Argentina. You're rooting for Argentina?
いや、だから、もし、これ別に家庭だから、もしメッシが好きだったらさ、
もしメッシが好きだったら。
私はメッシが別に好きじゃないからだけどさ。あと、もう一つの家庭として、例えば、日本人の選手が、じゃあ、いや、ドイツの、チームで、まあ、プレイしてるとね、普段はね。そう。
Yeah.
で、そのドイツのチームが大好きだと。チーム全体として。そしたら、
Yes.
そしたらよ。その、ドイツと日本の時に、どっちを応援するかってなると悩むよね。日本人の
I'm just saying, like, I think that zente that you're scooting, or the premise that you're creating is already something that is extremely, I've never really encountered. Everybody, like, the team that people like is just the one that they are the closest to in physical proximity to where they live the longest, basically, or where they identify as home. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you go, I remember I saw a game between Saitama and Kobe. As well. I mean, it's just like any other game. Like, obviously, people from Saitama are like, I love Saitama. Why do you love Saitama? Because I'm from Saitama. It's if they had intramural battles between like neighborhoods, you probably have the people who are from their neighborhood being like, no, this is the Saitama this street neighborhood, and this is the Saitama that street neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so when I think of things like that, which everybody takes for granted as being very normal, which sure they're very normal, I just think. There's no logic, like if you can't point to any reason other than you like grew up in the same physical proximity, I know there might be some evolutionary advantage to trying to befriend people close to you. But at the same time, I also feel like that small thing, which seems innocuous, is something that makes it very difficult to view everybody, like to not, for example, exploit the third world with like resources, which like every country in the world that's like the first world countries do this a lot, where all the labor gets exported. Basically we drain them all the resources and we think, it's okay, like we want to help out America, or it's okay Sweden, like, you know, that's something I don't think we talked about as much, which is like even all the most developed, very European progressive countries, all their resources, like everybody's benefiting off of the backs of like impoverished countries, and I've always thought like, how much is this I love my sports team and I want it to win, like the degrees of that preventing people from being able to empathize with the amount of people who are dying from like tuberculosis or other diseases or other problems in other countries.
あとさ、思ったのが、なんで自分の国を応援するかっていうので、多分思いついたのがさ、例えばテレビの前で見てますとね、スポーツ観戦してますと。で、一緒に見てる人ってさ、まあ同じ国の人じゃん。要するに。多分。日本に住んでたら日本人と一緒に見るじゃん。大体はね。家族と一緒に見る。
Tennis? Naoki, what's her name? Do you remember that controversy? The tennis play thing? The tennis player were American,
Osaka Naomi?
Japanese.Yeah, Osaka Naomi. Yeah.
じゃあ一緒にだからテレビの観戦してる側ね、見てる方だよ。
Oh, okay.
見てる方はさ、
見てる方。
日本家族で見るんだったら全員にまあ日本人とかでまあそう日本人が多い、日本の人たちが多いじゃん。そうするとみんなと一緒のことをやりたいってなるとさ、同じチームをまあ応援すると。そうなると日本を応援する。はい来た。
Okay.
だから、
yeah, I mean, just
同じことをしたいっていうのもあるんだよ、多分。
Yeah. We've gone a little long, but yeah, let us know your thoughts. This has been my ramblings for the day. Thank you so much for listening.
We're back.
戻りました。
So, in this section, we're going to talk about random stuff. So I'm going to start. Yesterday, I went to celebrate my friend's birthday.And he is yeah, congrats. So he's a German guy, and what surprised me was that in Germany, the birthday guy pays to other people. Isn't that surprising?
誕生日を持ってる人は
誕生日の人
友達とか、家族にもお金を出すの。お金を出すというか、いろいろ用意してあげる。
Yeah. So we went to celebrate with a few friends, and then they said in Germany you pay for their colleagues to celebrate your birthday. Like even you have to bring your own birthday cakes at your workplace, and then if you want to take those people to dinner, then you have to pay for dinner. Yeah, that was surprising because
プレゼントとかあげないと。
Yeah, but you get the present. No, you get the present. if you have
自分のためのプレゼントを買って他の人を自分にくれるってこと？
Yeah. But anyways, what did I say? So in Japan and in America too, right?
So.
Yeah. So like other people will pay for you because it's your birthday, but it was the opposite in Germany. So that was surprising. And I know in America, in elementary school, you guys have like a big birthday parties. Right?
そう、実はトラウマがある、そのことに関しては。
Okay.
何でしたっけ？小学校かな、なぜかわからないけど、まあ一応母はパナマ人で、パナマ人は結構一般的にパーティーが好きな人たちだと言われる。
Yeah.
まあそうは思う。 で、その毎年私の誕生日の日に全員私の家に誘われた。誕生日パーティーとしては、ね。
Yeah, you invite the whole class, right?
そう。
Yeah.
でも、まあ今の私と同じ上位だったから、多分、クラスの 95% は、まあ好きではなかったと言えるかもしれない。
Other people didn't like you or you didn't?
いや、まあ、そうかもしれない。いや、逆。
Wait, what? You didn't like other people?
そう。
Okay.
まあ、いや、全員じゃなくて、いや、なんか、dislike というよりも、好きではない。
Like, you didn't like
literally dislike. Like, no,
you dislike?
Just not like, not dislike, just not like. なんていうか、嫌いの気持ちは入ってない。ただ、好きではなかった。
So you didn't like, right? You didn't dislike, but you didn't like.
そう。like の気持ちはゼロだけど、dislike の気持ちはゼロ。
Okay.
まあ、
like どうでもいい。
人の人に関しては。そう、どうでもいい。それでなんか私の誕生日なのに、めっちゃ見たくない人が家に来るのは嫌だから、結構なんか泣いちゃった。いつ泣いたかわからないけど、泣いた覚えがあります。なんで私の誕生日なのに、自分なんか一人で、まあ一人っていうか、私の友達だけで、なんか言わなく、なんか他に人を誘わなくちゃいけないのとか思って、で、それで逆に何でしたっけ、ドイツの文化だと、さらに、嫌がる人にプレゼントっていうか、いろいろ用意しなくちゃいけなかったら、
No. You don't prepare presents to other people.
いや、プレゼントは、それは分かってるんだけど、そのプレゼント以外のものとか、なんかレストランに行ったり、例えば全員の小学のクラスをあるレストランに誘って自分が払わないといけないとなったら、どういうことなんだ、みんななんか私の誕生日なのに嫌われて、私が嫌いな人のために払わなくちゃいけないことになってる。
It is kind of sad though, because like that means
かわいそう。
Yeah, everyone doesn't remember your birthday, right? And then you are begging
どういうこと？そう。
Yeah, you're begging that to be celebrated by other people by like doing that. So yeah.
というか、なんか自分が好きではない人だけど、誕生日があるから、まあ、いろいろいいもの食べるんじゃないみたいなことを思ってる人も来るかもしれない。例えばなんか結婚式みたいにアメリカのウェディングクラッシュという概念があるんだけど、この結婚してる人を知らなくても結婚に行く人が、まあ、多いというか一応いる。なぜかというと、いろいろ美味しいもの食べられるから。
Yeah, they get the food. Oh my god, that happens. Oh my, yeah, but like that happens to senpai kohai relationship. Because like when senpai is inviting like for some event, and then kohai will kind of go there because they I mean like there's like it's a whole thing, but yeah, I'm not gonna talk about that, but yeah, if it's like a free food, come on, and then people will come. Yeah.
多分話したと思うんだけど、大学時代の話、留学してた時、日本に、あるクラスのある先生が、みんななんか一緒に居酒屋に行こうよとなって、で、みんな、いや、ぜひ何でも頼んでください。自分がなんか食べ放題だからいいんだって、みんな食べてて、いろいろ飲んだり、まあ食べたり、してて、でも結局なんかお会計を見たときに、なんか自分の目が輝いてて、やばいとかとなって、それで私と3人の人が、いや大丈夫、全部払わなくていいよとかになって、で結局全員は払うことになった。
Yeah, because like so in that situation, there's like a Japanese unspoken rule for that. So once someone, your boss or senpai, is saying that like feel free to order whatever you want, even if they say that, that doesn't mean that you can order whatever you want. Like you have to kind of, like choose cheaper things, and you cannot order. Yeah, it's better to, how do you say, it's better not to have drinks. Like,
いや、みんなはそんな意識してたと思うんだけど、問題なのはなんか15人以上の人が来たから、多分思ったより人が来たというのが問題かもしれない。
Yeah.
でもとにかくめっちゃ面白かったと。なんかこういう先生が、なんてことやったんだろうと思い始めた、顔。
I feel how bad that teacher, felt.
うん。多分なんかドイツ人だったら自分の誕生日の日倒産しちゃう人がいたかも。
いや、破産ね。破産しちゃうかもね。
そう、破産。そう。友達が結構いて、なんか誕生日があるんだけど、一緒に、来ないとかってなって、で、誕生日になんか1000人以上の人が来て、破産しちゃうっていう。
In this case, it's better to have a few friends.
そう。
Like just one is enough.
前のエピソードのドイツ人が逆に誕生日がめっちゃ迷惑多いから友達がいなくてディプレッションになる傾向が多いってことだよね。この誕生日の問題がそもそもヨーロッパのディプレッションの原因になったってことだった。めっちゃ面白かった。他の自分の誕生日の経験あるの？ちなみに面白い誕生日。
Actually, my family doesn't have like any birthday parties, and I don't remember when was the last time my family celebrated my birthday. So yeah, sad.
残念。
Yeah.
誕生日ねとあやみなんとか年ぐらいの誕生日。
It's in July, so yeah. I appreciate it if somebody celebrates my birthday.
ポッドキャストの日にやってたらみんな誕生日おめでとう書いてください。
はい。お願いします。
And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, that means you send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related and or otherwise. And this week we have a comment from Oddity, which has a bunch in it. And I'll read it. Not much of a technician, but it sounds like a PSU problem. This is my computer problem from last week. I know computers have this resistor thingy that prevents the battery from being charged 100%, so it won't overcharge. So maybe it's that. But if it's the motherboard, it isn't worth fixing. Like Amy said, also seems like a good time to set up a Ko-Fi for the pod. I'll consider that. Simultaneously translation. I'm painfully familiar with this issue. People think that being multilingual means you're always ready to fire at will in each one of, so many languages, when in reality, it's more like your brain thinks in all of them at any given moment, and you have to make an effort to sound coherent. I will now illustrate with an anecdote. The other day, this customer came to the office who only spoke Russian. I hadn't spoken Russian in years, so I started stuttering trying to communicate with him. At one point, I had to ask something about a watch, and my brain went, yes, we know this, toke no koto desu ga. And I was like, brain, shut up, we're not doing Japanese right now. But my brain was just like, nope, toke, we're going with toke. 頭の中で時計のパーティーがある.
That sounds like Alice in Wonderland.
Yes. Eventually I remembered how you would just say watch in all the languages I know, but Russian in all languages I know but Russian. I had stuttered for so long he guessed it and said it himself. There's a bit about depression, but I want to talk about this portion first. So, I mean, is this, have you had these simultaneous translation problems? I've been having them a lot more. I think I've talked about, I have a lot of experience switching from English to Japanese, but not Japanese to Spanish. And they sound very similar in the sounds do, at least to me. And so there's a lot of situations where I'll replace like pero in Spanish, which is like but, with demo or kedo in Japanese, which is also but, or, gosh, there's a bunch of examples I've done, and it comes out of nowhere. And like being honestly for this episode, I was kind of concerned. I've been speaking so much Spanish. I was like, have I forgotten how to speak Japanese? I know that's an unreasonable thought, but that was crossing my mind. I'm like, the podcast might be over.
これから日本語と英語じゃなくて、日本語とスパニッシュになるか。あ、違うか。日本語と。違うよ。英語とスパニッシュになるの。いや、私、スパニッシュわかんないから。
日本語忘れたし。Yeah.
困るな。
Do you have any experiences like this?
ね、言葉が出ないときはあるね。だから今でさ、これ多分先週のエピソードでも言ったけど、いまだになんか sorry とか言っちゃうし、あとなんだろうね。あと、例えばさ、it's worth doing とかさ、worth っていう言葉ってさ、日本語で言うとさ、なんかおかしくなんだよ。なんとかの価値があるとかさ、なんかちょっと不自然になっちゃうんだよね。だからそういう時ってどう言えばいいんだろうって。
that was actually a great I think I talked about it a little bit, but something that I was thinking about a lot. And actually I really want to talk about this whole event I went to centered around Asian stuff, and I never actually talked about it. I attended and actually got a talk with the official translator for Boruto, and I don't think I talked to you much about it, but yeah, I got to see a presentation of theirs, and I got to talk to them in person, like the person translating, Naruto, Boruto, and they had a whole presentation about some difficulties of translating, and I'll probably be making a video on main channel video about that at some point. Just there you go. Spoilers at some point, because I just find it so interesting that translation is not a game of it is a game equally of language understanding, but also cultural understanding and shared background and how people say things. Not only by linguistically understanding like things that just that's how you say like it's worth doing, but I literally mean like conceptually how you think about expressing an idea. Very different. Like I think the worth example is good, where something having value in, you know what I'm saying? Oh gosh, I'm even reframing it in my English way. You can even see how I'm doing it. Like how would you say that in Japanese from you? Yeah. Having experience that is enjoyable or good. Attributing that to like value or worth as a way to be like the first way you want to express it. That's like as a result of thinking in English brain. And the more dissimilar two cultures are, the more workload you need to do in this cultural switching and going from direct translation to interpretive like translation into like the actual intent and meaning. And I found like, sorry, go ahead.
deserve も、まあ、似たような感じだけどさ、he doesn't deserve it とかさ。
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. What does Japanese have any notion of deserving something?
彼はそれに値しない。絶対おかしいじゃん。
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I've actually know that just the word deserve, in what context do you deserve something in a Japanese context? All Japanese thought is around meiwaku, sekinin. I rarely ever hear the concept of deserving anything.
あとさ、なんて
What would you even say to 権利があるそのもらう権利があるとか。
なんて例えばさ、この
deserve, so natural.
deserve だとさ、なんかシチュエーションとしてはさ、例えば、じゃあ例えば私テスト最近あったのね。でテストで頑張ったと、はい、めちゃめちゃ頑張って、じゃあ今日ご褒美に高いケーキ買うかっつってケーキ屋に行きますと。で高いケーキ買ってきましたよ。でそれでじゃあ友達が、oh you deserve because like you put so much effort on this exam, you deserve it とか言うじゃん。
Yeah.
In English だと。それを日本語で言うとなんだろうね。頑張ったから。
I think you'd say backwards. I think you'd literally put the focus in the opposite direction. You'd say, もらわなくて残念だね。とか。
いや言わないよ。いや、ご褒美、自分へのご褒美だねって言うと思
う。Wait, so go ahead.
自分へのご褒美。
No. I'm not talking about translations. I'm talking about how somebody would actually go about approaching the situation. Like instead of thinking about translation, I'm saying how would that play out in a Japanese context? I'm saying realistically, I feel could be more likely for somebody to put in all this work and let's just say it seems like they for some reason did poorly, or they expected to get something from their friends but they didn't. Let's say it was their birthday and nobody said happy birthday to them. I think instead of saying you deserve to have somebody say happy birthday to you on your birthday, you would have somebody just do some sort of phrasing of 残念だね、まあ仕方がない, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Instead of saying 値すればよ like you know saying the you deserved to have someone say happy birthday on your birthday
値しないの方の時に言うかもねってことでしょ
Yes, exactly. Well, that was the same thing you're saying, right? That is the same situation. You're saying in an English context, when you don't get the thing, somebody will say you should get the thing. If in Japan, if you don't get the thing, you go, 残念だね. So just the whole idea of even saying that
君は何とかに値しないよみたいな。確かに。
Yeah, just so
確か
unnatural.
に。
もらう権利があったぜ。
面白いね。
Like previous conversation talking about what was it? The unnatural Japanese. And that's that's something else that anime gives you. That you get those culture, you get a lot of Japanese culture. A lot of the information I talk about here, which anime goes, oh, I didn't know that from anime. We had our whole traditional. What was it? Dento bunka, our traditional Japanese episode too, and a lot of that, like what I'm saying, a lot of the stuff that you get from stuff that's made by Japanese people, even if it's not like live action Japanese people, because I think what I'm saying, I think a lot more authentic stuff represents Japanese like as lived experiences in anime than at least some of the dramas I've seen, which is with the 濡れちゃダメだよ。
なんでそのフレーズにするの
Because I had to, bro, when you're editing for like hundreds of hours or whatever.
違うよ。まあいいや。
Sorry, go ahead. Oh yeah.
なんでそのフレーズをピックアップするの
It was so funny. I was laughing when I saw that. 濡れちゃダメだよ。Anyways, because his heads and his eyes are just so. It's so funny.
エイジセッティングしないとこのエピソードは。
Well, all of our episodes are explicit. But okay, there's a little bit about depression that Oddity talks about, and yeah, I'm gonna read her quote on that. So she says, there's this book by Alan de Botton, probably pronouncing incorrectly, Status Anxiety, which posits that people were happier in pre-industrial revolution, hierarchical societies because they had less freedom. He says that when social mobility was limited, people felt less anxious and depressed precisely because there were boundaries to what is achievable and what one could attribute their lack of success to an external cause, the class system. In contrast, in modern egalitarian and meritocratic societies, the possibilities are seemingly limitless, but that also increases the pressure to succeed and make people compare themselves to others all the time. The result is that they have no choice but to internalize the blame for their lack of achievement, and that causes a constant state of discontent and depression. Thanks for that as well. I haven't heard about this book before. I have heard about that idea before. I kind of I see it as you have just a different set of problems in that situation. I don't think everybody's necessarily always content or happy, especially when you can. I guess it depends how, like, where we're defining pre-industrial revolution, because that is a pretty big period of time going on there. But I could definitely see how when you have less options, you feel content about the options you have, right? If it's like you go to only have one store in town and it only sells ice cream, like vanilla ice cream. And you've had vanilla ice cream your whole life. And then you go to the next town over for the first time in your life and they have 50 flavors of ice cream. You're like, oh my God, I was missing out on chocolate swirl dumpling ice cream.
なんでダンプリングとアイスクリーム間違えた何言おうとしたんだっけ。それこれもさ YouTube で見たんだけどさ、なんかテイストテスティングでフレーバーアイスクリームテイストテスティングでさ、なんだろう、選ぶ選択肢が少ないほどなんだろう、被験者、まあそのテストされる人は後悔がないっていうのはよく言うよね。例えば3つしかバニラチョコ抹茶しかないのと、もう50個もさフレーバーがあって選んでこれにしますって選ぶときだと、絶対あとそのテイストテスティングした後の選んだアイスクリームに対して後悔する割合っていうのは絶対その後者50 flavors の方が絶対多いから、やっぱりそれもアプライするんだと思うよね。その お金持ってる人は。
Yeah, no.
ね、そう。
I agree, and I've heard that example like used a lot. But I will say it's like, although generally I think that is the case with ice cream specifically, I've really never felt it. I'm always so content with. I don't know.
アイスクリームは全部美味しいだけどね。
Yeah, but oh gosh, that I forgot. I don't think we ever told our funny ice cream story in New York, but anyway, don't worry about it. But I would say that when you're talking about what's it called, this choice in terms of your actual like ability and like things you could do and possibilities in life, that I think the notion that I don't know, I guess depends what you're talking about, because I feel like in America there is a false idea of meritocracy, right? And so well, realistically speaking, and even Japan, I mean, there are places that you have more stability than you have in other locations, but a lot of the wealthiest people in the world, all the like billionaires, even like multimillionaires, there's always, it's either luck is a massive determining factor, or luck of like this current situation, or luck of like your birth situation, and like many compounding things like good education, resources, connections, etc., etc. So one of like the largest contributors, for example, if you take the average person in Sweden and compare them to the average person somewhere like in more impoverished country, the difference in how good their life is, I don't know, at the age of 30 is largely determined on the RNG of their birth, right? And like what location they were born in. So I feel like this idea of meritocracy in itself is more so just broadly speaking, at least to like the largest degree, if we're talking about what's the most contributing factor, is the luck part. So I don't think this a notion of it's only like maybe it's the notion of having meritocracy, but then you failing is what makes it feel so bad, if that makes sense. Like you think that the world you're in allows for meritocracy, and because you think that, it makes you feel really bad about your failure. I know this is a little political theory, but yeah, I mean, I definitely would say that I don't think that even though like you could hypothetically put every human inside like a boxed cage, like I don't know, to me it says like, oh, the chickens inside the, you know what I'm saying, the chickens inside the slaughterhouse are happy because they have no opportunity to know what outside is, and they don't have, you know, but at the same time we do know that having bad working conditions or bad living conditions for cows or animals can still be bad even if they've never lived in anything else.
あれさ、そのディスカッションさ、よくさ、ズーがさ、動物にとっていいのか悪いのかのさ、ディスカッションでよく使われるよね。なんか、保護されてるから食べ物あるからいいとかさ、ズーをなんていうの？
Well, they normally do life expectancy conversations, right? Like you normally talk about life expectancies. Like which one do you expect to live longer versus captive versus non-captive, and a lot of times like the non-captive lives a lot longer. I think that's not always the case though, if like it's a domesticated animal, but yeah, I mean like it's I guess as personally you're saying, obviously you'd want as an individual, I feel like it's hard to say that you'd want less choice. Like for example, if I was born in a place without internet, like oh my god, I guess like in not be able to connect with people around me, like I've rarely ever, like all the connections I made with people to the extent that I have really not, I mean even though I do have local friends, but like people who I feel like have similar interests are through like the internet, and maybe that's because some of my interests are more niche, but I feel like the more niche you are, the more grateful you are for having options, and the less niche your interests are, the more you're like, well, it's fine, you have food around you, where else could you possibly want? Yeah, thanks for always the good comments. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com, and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Ayami.
Signing off. Jane.